today's session the storytelling aspect of screenwriting. And I call it screenwriting through storytelling. And storytelling isn't just about screenwriting, clearly. Many different situations in life where telling a compelling story is what's going to win the day for you. So whether it's trying to pull someone over your point of view, whether you're in a job they like you, good story is always very helpful and actually much more effective than just providing a bunch of facts. A bunch of facts really is not even a documentary. A good documentary has a good story, just like any other type of story. Hang on just one second. There we go. Excuse me, didn't want to be hacking all the way through the session. So I have this quote here from Mark Burnett. Mark Burnett was the creator of the show Survivor and The Apprentice and many other very popular reality shows. So what I like about this quote is that he ties together storytelling through just a variety of mediums, talking around a fire in a cave, Shakespeare plays, television, movies, books. The idea is that the stories and the characters are what really take people on a journey. The only thing I might disagree here is he says he does it without scripts and without actors, because if you've been involved with a reality show, you know there are scripts and they might not be actors, but there's a lot happening that's directing them in terms of what they're going to be doing. Other than that, I completely agree with what you have to say. All right, so during the session today, I'm just going to invite you just to post some responses in the chat. So I have this image on the screen and I just like to find out, what is this image? What do you know it to be? Just type your answer in the chat. All right. Excellent. We got some yellow. Yep. Wizard of Oz, Wizard of Oz. Just curious, if you've actually seen The Wizard of Oz, just type yes in the chat. Wow. And they say that young people don't like old movies. So that's really terrific to see that. There's a couple of reasons why I'm sharing this image of the yellow brick road. One is it's going to be sort of a recurring theme, what I'm going to be talking about today. The other is that Greenfield asked us to talk a little bit about our career path as well. And I show the yellow brick road because if you remember from the movie, it wasn't a straight line, was it? It was very windy, and I feel like that's what my career path has been as well. And much like Dorothy, I picked up friends along the way. I learned things along the way. And also like Dorothy, I realized there's really no destination when it comes to your career. Because you might remember she got all the way to Emerald City, and then she found out she wasn't even done her journey. So she had to go back home to finish her journey. And then her journey was just starting. And that's the way I feel like my career has been as well. And that's actually a positive thing, because I think what happens a lot of times is that people are told, especially young people, you better figure out what you want to do with your life. And you know what? There's plenty of time to figure that out. What's really important is that you pay attention to things you're interested in. You follow your curiosity, the things you're interested in, and those are going to lead you in the direction you should go, versus trying to come up with what you think the end goal is going to be and then following the path to get there. Because you're going to touch things, you're going to try a lot of different things, and you're going to find that some things you love and some things you don't once you've tried them. The important thing is to have tried them. So think about your career path more like this winding yellow brick road. And remember, Dorothy had a successful resolution, didn't she? And I really think you will too if you just follow the things you're interested in. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So I have an undergraduate degree in journalism and a minor in media arts from the University of South Carolina. I actually live outside of Philadelphia in the Doylestown area. It's where I grew up, but I went to school in South Carolina. I lived there for a while. I got a master's in communications from Temple. I've been writing since junior high. I hate to show my age, but the very first year that Saturday Night Live was on, I watched it religiously, and every year after that. And after that, all I really wanted to do was write comedy and sketches. And I've been writing screenplays since 1998. I've been in the screenwriting group since then. So I've written multiple screenplays. I have written and directed short films, documentaries, music videos. I'm currently working on a feature script that I'm working with a producer that I'm planning to shoot next summer, Philadelphia area. And just by way, again, of understanding sort of the winding path, I got that degree in journalism. I got an internship at this public radio network, and that internship led to a job. But while I was in college, I worked on the campus radio station where I put together my demo tapes that I was able to use to get that internship. I also wrote for the student newspaper. I did music reviews for them. I was in the video club, and I was out shooting things on my own as well. So I will tell you that I am really not a very motivated person, I don't think. But what I did was there were things I was just interested in, and I just did those things. And things I'm not interested in, I'm not always doing. So I think it's just evidence that you don't have to be, if you're a type A, you know what you want to do with the rest of your life, that's great. But if you're a type B and you're more laid back and you're trying to figure out, that is great too. And you will find your path if you just keep doing things that you're interested in. Now, the other thing is that I do my full-time career is as a market research consultant. And I initially got into market research because of the media content. And I spent a lot of time, tested hundreds of TV pilots for networks like ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, tested all types of content ideas for cable networks. So I got to see what people really are interested in and things people like and things people don't like so much. So it was great. It's been a great learning experience in terms of understanding what people want and thinking about that in part when you're creating material as well. How does a good story begin? A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. What, type into the chat, what movie is this from? Yes, I see lots of Star Wars. That's right. Now, imagine it was, I think it was 75 or 76 that movie came out. But imagine going for the first time knowing nothing about the movie, and this is the very first thing you see. And you learn two very important pieces of information about the film. The very first sentence that's put on the screen. We know the story took place a long time ago and in a galaxy far, far away. So we've already been given a time and a place. And the place we know has nothing to do with where we are. So we're already being transported without knowing anything else about it. So this is a great start to a story. So anytime someone says, let me tell you a story, if you can begin the next sentence by saying something like the time and the place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, you will already have hooked people because you're setting the stage. And I'm doing that for this session. So now we're going to do a little reflection. And this will be a nice quick little break, but I want you to really think deeply about these questions I'm going to ask you. So I think probably most of you have your cameras off, so you don't even have to feel embarrassed about this. So what I want you to do is close your eyes. And then first thing I want you to do is think of the saddest movie you've ever seen. And think of the saddest scene in that movie. With your eyes closed, I want you to just imagine how you felt when you were watching that scene, the saddest scene in the saddest movie you've ever seen. How did your body feel? How did your body react? What were your emotions in that moment? And really feel deeply what it was like to feel those emotions. Okay, so open your eyes and I want you to type into the chat, what are some of the emotions that you felt? Sad, I see. What else do we have? Oh, the chills. Very interesting. Confused. The giggles. Shocked, devastated. Hopeless. Yeah, I bet we've all been at a point in our lives where we've felt hopeless, right? Annoyed, wishing I didn't see it, right? You can't go back and unsee it, right? It's a real feeling. All right, these are terrific comments. So this is just one example of how emotions are critical to storytelling. Let's do another one. I want you to close your eyes again, and I want you to think of the funniest movie you've ever seen. And I want you to think of the funniest scene in that movie. And then I want you to, again, think about how you felt, and think about how your body felt, and think about the emotions that you experienced. But really deeply reflect on it and think about that one scene. When you're ready, just open your eyes and type your feelings into the chat. What was your experience? Alive. I like that. Laughing so hard I was crying. Yes. I was just watching that movie and Buddy ran into a locker. Any other feelings you had? Laughed. There's, by the way, on Netflix, there's a series about the making of classic movies, and each episode is just about one movie, and one was about Elf. And the story that's almost always the through line in all of those, about all the movies that you really love, is that they probably weren't going to get made. And they had so many significant issues along the way, and just that it's a long, difficult process, but in the end, it's definitely worth it when you come out with something like Elf. Okay, great. Laughing so hard you feel like you're going to die laughing. All right, let's do one more exercise. Now close your eyes one more time, and I want you to think of the scariest movie that you've ever seen. And I want you to think of the scariest scene. Think about how you felt. Think about what it felt like in your body. How did your body react to that? What were the emotions that you felt? Okay, tell me some emotions that they came up with. Tense, horrified, anxious. Jumped physically, so you physically moved. Uneasy. Yeah, that's a terrible one. Disconcerted. Fast heart rate. Yeah. I was watching In Danger. I was watching making of about the original Halloween, which I saw in the movie theaters when I was about 16. And there's a couple scenes in that movie that stick with me to this day, and my heart races, and I'm afraid to get in a car because it was something that happens to one of the characters in the car. And just seeing that person in the mask scares me so much to this day. Curious as to what happens next. So you've just described, Zach, the key to creating a great story, that your audience is going to be curious about what happens next. Okay, great reflections, and thank you for sharing your thoughts there. So this is just an example of meme I found. When I watched the ending of The Wizard of Oz. Happy, sad, the journey's over, you're relieved, but there are a lot of different feelings, and it's not just one emotion. And that's when you can create nuance and complexity like that, you really have accomplished something. So what's your job as a storyteller? Emotion. Make me feel something. This is a big issue. I think you probably can think of a number of things you've seen where you thought, I didn't laugh, I didn't cry, I really felt nothing. I spent an hour watching this and I really got very little out of it. Maybe the story was well constructed. It ended up the way I thought it would end, which really is quite sometimes just a disappointment. But if you didn't experience any emotion while you were watching this content, then really that creator had failed. And I think it's not easy to work emotion into a piece, but if you think about those reflections we just did, if you're not laughing when you write something funny, if you're not feeling chills almost brought to tears when you write something sad, or if you're not practically jumping out of your seat, or you don't even want to write the thing that you think is so scary, If you're not feeling those emotions, how could you expect that your audience is ever going to feel them? It's got to start with you. And now you have emotions, you have thoughts tied to those emotions. And now with those, if you do those types of reflections, you can think about, if you're really having the impact that you want to have. So before we talk about making up stories, I just want to talk about some real life stories, because someone asked in the last group, where do you get ideas from? They're all around you, really. So we know these characters: the hero, the underdog, the comeback, the triumph, right? So I have two different images on the screen. At the top of the screen, I have Beyonce and Jay-Z in the Louvre. But you might recall, this is from 2018, and you might recall that there were 3 albums that they did that were associated with them. Beyonce did an album where she talked about Becky with the good hair and how essentially Jay-Z was having an affair. Right? Now, think about this as act 1 of the story, or the inciting incident, that she recognizes that there's been an affair, and now she's confronting him about the affair. Then Jay-Z put out an album where he was apologizing, talking about his love for Beyonce, right? This is sort of in the middle of act 2, or getting closer to the end of act 2, where he's trying to make amends, but will he be able to make amends? Will she come back to him? Then what you're seeing here is from act 3, which is the album they did together called The Carters, where they talked about their love for each other and that their relationship was as strong as ever. It was a 3-act structure. There was always a question: did all this really happen? Was all this just marketing? We don't really know the answer to it, but it was very effective because people were talking about it. And again, it was like any 3-act structure of a great story. Now, the bottom picture you might recognize, Nick Foles holding up the Super Bowl trophy. This is all of these characters at once. He was the hero. The Eagles were the underdog. This was a comeback for him. He was a bench player, came to win Super Bowl, and the triumph. They won the Super Bowl, right? There was also a bad guy in this story, which was Tom Brady. So you might remember, not only did the Patriots lose, Tom Brady didn't come over and shake Nick Foles' hand. He left the field. So made him even more of a bad guy, right? So sports is great for stories because it's pretty clear cut. There's winners, there's losers, there's a beginning, middle, and end. It's not over until the very end, till the last play of the game. Things can change. So where someone said unease, for a horror story. Sports, watching sports, if you really care, there's a lot of unease there because you want to know how it's going to turn out, and nobody can tell you, right? But that's what makes for a great story. That's why people watch sports. They want to see how it's going to turn out. Sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're sad. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that you are drawn into it. And these are real life stories, and these stories are all around you all the time. And it could be personal stories, things that have happened in your family, happened to your friends, or something you read about in the news, something that happened at school. These can all be starting points, but they don't have to be documentaries. They don't have to be exactly what happened. You can jump off in any direction you want with the story. But I thought recently, like a story idea I had was, what if someone my age got famous on TikTok? What would I do? How would that change my life? And then I just started building from there, thinking about a story to be built around, because it's my point of view, but it's also something that's more universal. But that's just something that came to my head one day, because I keep my antenna open. I'm just keep thinking about what's around me. And that's the way to find great stories. So what makes for a good story then? Well, beginning, middle, and end, rising tension, but also it's how you tell it. So there are plenty of movies that have been made that have been about almost nothing. There's a whole TV show, Seinfeld, that they even made a joke of, that it was about a show about nothing. The characters don't change. Jason Alexander said in that show, if the characters changed or improved, it wouldn't have been a good show. But it's all about how you tell the story. So if we look at the left side of this cartoon, we see a caveman who's hiding behind a rock from what appears to be some type of baby saber-toothed tiger, maybe. On the right side, what does he do when he tells the story? It was a battle to the death with the largest saber-toothed tiger he'd ever seen. And look at the animation in his face as he's telling the story. This isn't just, let me tell you what happened to me today. This is, let me tell you what happened in a galaxy long, far, far away, long ago, right? You get somebody listening, and then you can embellish the story however you want. But it's the telling that really makes a difference. So when we're talking about structure, there's lots of stuff I've read that had great structure, but not good storytelling. People basically had done a science experiment and reported on it. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're really focused on bringing emotion to the story, drawing people in, and embellishing where we need to make the story compelling. So today I'm going to talk to you about 4 key areas of storytelling. And the first one is conflict. And this is the #1 area. So I'm going to, at the end of the session, I'm going to just give you some resources to look into. And one is a book that I read called Writing Screenplays That Sell the Ackerman Way. And it's written by William Ackerman, a professor at UCLA, screenwriting professor. And in his class, what he does right at the beginning is he has every student sign a contract that says, I will have conflict in my screenplay. And the reason he does this is that we really tend to not have enough conflict. We don't have enough drama. We don't have enough tension in what we're writing. And I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But first, I want to focus on the top picture in this slide. What image is this movie from? Type into the chat. What image is this movie from? All right. I see a bunch of people writing Die Hard. That's right. So if you've seen Die Hard, you know, it's actually, you know, sort of the seminal action film in the sense of sort of the style of the film. But I think what sets this film apart is it doesn't just have action. It has all the other elements that make for a great story. It has drama. It's basically a love story. It's about a couple that's broken up, and the man wants to reunite with his wife. And he's come all the way to California to try and convince her to get back together with him. He just happens to be a cop that stumbles in on a kidnapping that he's got to try and stop. But why is he trying to do it? He's trying to save his wife. And he's even the whole time trying to protect that information from the terrorists, that his wife is in that group. That's his #1 concern. It's not just to save the hostages or kill as many people as possible. So there's also a lot of suspense because in the story, the terrorist who's holding the gun here doesn't know who this person is, John McClane. And you can see in this image, in this pivotal scene, the terrorist is pretending to be someone else. And John McClane doesn't know he's the terrorist. So he's actually telling him personal details in this scene when the terrorist is trying to think about how to kill him. The other thing you might remember from that movie is there's a lot of humor that really comes out of the conflict. So when Bruce Willis is in difficult situations, he's talking out loud to keep himself sane, but he's saying really funny things. He can't believe the situation that he's in, but he's not just making jokes to make jokes. There's a reason behind everything that he's saying. But this is all coming out of conflict. And that's the difference between a standard Arnold Schwarzenegger film from the 90s, where it was just kill as many people as possible with no real point to it. And a movie like Die Hard that's been imitated multiple times. The story came out of the conflict. Okay, how about this bottom image? What movie is this one? Yes, Get Out, right? One person in the previous session guessed Us, which of course is a different Jordan Peele movie, also very suspenseful. But one of the reasons I'm showing you this is that I said to my screenwriting teacher one time that I felt bad for my characters and what I was doing to them. They said, oh no, your job is to torture your characters. You want to see what they do when you torture them, right? If you think about your own experience, the difficulties that you've faced, how you handle those difficulties kind of points to where you're going to be headed. And sometimes you're going to handle them in a way you wish you would have done better, but you learn from that. You'll do it better next time. Other times you're going to handle it terrifically and it'll be a triumph for you, even though it's a difficult situation. But if you imagine if your whole life was just a flat line where nothing ever happened to you, that's nice on the one hand, because you never have to experience any real pain. But on the other hand, what are you learning? What are you really, how are you living? So you have to be willing to torture your characters in order to see how they react. And it in part will reflect how you handle situations. So this is why conflict is important. Conflict in the story, conflict for your characters. All right, the next important step. And you see, I'm actually doing these in order. So number one is conflict. Number two is creating unique characters, because if you have some cool characters and nothing happens to them, there's no content there. So how do you create unique characters? I know I've written things in the past where I'll look at the dialogue, I'll look at the characters, how they're behaving, what they're doing. They're all just kind of the same. I didn't really think that hard about making anybody interesting or unique. If you think about a movie like It, 2, that had adult actors in it, each one of those characters was very specific. You could pull them out of the movie, make a separate movie about them, and they would have their own story and be clear, who they were. So you have to give each character a superpower. Who's this? What's this image from on the top part of this screen? Type in the chat. What's that from? All right, we have some people in here who have seen some movies. It's awesome. That's right, it's from The Sixth Sense, who, by the way, M. Night Shyamalan, local filmmaker, actually came to my class 2 different times to talk, and I was not either one. The first time, it was before The Sixth Sense had come out, and he said, I'm working on a project now that I can't really talk about. So, but he took an ordinary kid and gave him a superpower, right? I can see dead people. But the kid just wanted to be ordinary. He didn't want to be weird. So, but by giving someone a superpower, even if the superpower is just being funny, you've given them something very unique. So this character in the lower left-hand corner, I'm sure you know well, SpongeBob. I have twin daughters, they're 20 years old. I've watched a lot of SpongeBob in my life, and some of the SpongeBob episodes are some of my favorite episodes from any series. They're so well constructed and so funny and unexpected. And the thing that drives it, I've given this a lot of thought, the thing that really drives it is SpongeBob. First of all, look at his look. He's very unique in the way he looks. His voice is incredibly unique. Sometimes my daughters will send me TikTok videos just with SpongeBob as the audio on it. And I hear it, I'm like, I know exactly what that is. Maybe I know what episode it's from. And the way he talks. And each one of the characters on that show are all very unique. So this is a real challenge, especially for younger people that haven't been out in the world that much. You can tend to write characters based on your friends that all kind of sound the same. As opposed to think about each of your friends, they each have something that's unique about them, something they're really interested in, right? I was thinking about the movie High School Musical. And you might remember there was one scene in High School Musical where they sing the song about stick to the status quo, but each of the characters talks about something secret that they have that's like their superpower. Basketball player bakes, and the guy who skateboards plays the cello. The one girl does hip hop dance, and they don't want to share that because people make fun of that, right? But on the other hand, that's their superpower. That's what makes them unique. So you can even think about a backstory for these characters. What is the thing that makes them different from everybody else? How could somebody watch this? If I put these people in a police lineup, would they be able to figure out who each person is just based on the way they look? So unique characters is critical. All right, now we're going to talk about a very difficult part of storytelling, which is the structure. And I think I've found in my writing that I like writing scenes. I really love writing dialogue, and dialogue can be a real crutch because sometimes you can use that to tell the story, which is not the way to go, which we'll talk about. But structure is really hard. It's really difficult to visualize across, especially a long piece, an hour-and-a-half movie. What's the structure going to be like? So here's an example of a way to create a great screenplay in just 47 simple steps. And this actually comes out of that book I was talking about, Writing Screenplays That Sell the Ackerman Way. And I love what he talks about with conflict, but I'm not as big a fan of this. This looks like some type of, like a coding exercise where all you have to do is plug in all the stuff. They even have a place, write in your name and your script's title here, and then write in stuff. And then at the end, you come up with a great script. Now, for Hollywood scripts, they really are looking for a specific type of structure. There's some expectation, which we can talk about, but still, this is so complicated. I look at this and it makes me a little depressed in terms of trying to figure out the structure for any type. It's not just for films, but for any type of content. So let's try and simplify this a little bit. This is the way, after many years of writing, that I think about structure, which really, it's creating higher highs and lower lows, building tension and resolving the tension. And what you see in the upper left-hand corner here is a sine wave. So if you've ever taken a math class, physics class, you've probably seen a sine wave. And you can see that at the beginning, there's just a small high and a small low, and then a bigger high and a bigger low, and a bigger high and a bigger low. And it keeps growing and growing and growing until all the way to the end, right? So this is the way you should think when you're structuring any story. It's going to start small in a galaxy far, far away, right? Just a little bit of information, but then something's going to happen, and there's going to be something positive, like I win the first battle, and then the next thing is I realize my mom died in the battle. That's terrible. So things just get bigger and bigger. And if you have something that looks like this bottom diagram, it's literally a flat line. This is a heart attack, right? Starts out great. And I know I've written this. I've spent weeks working on the first 5 pages of something. It's amazing. And then I write the rest of the story flat line. I don't even know where the story is going to go. So it's very important that you not only have tension, but that you have growing tension throughout. And you watch a movie like Dodgeball. I don't know if you've ever seen Dodgeball, right? But in Dodgeball, they make it all the way to the finals, the highest high. Then the leader of the group is convinced that he is a loser and he leaves the lowest low. Then what happens? He comes back, and then they win the tournament, and he defeats the guy from the Globo Gym, right? So each of those experiences, the tension was growing, the experience was changing over time. So that's number 3, structure. Here's one more way to look at it. If you've seen Finding Nemo, what is the terrible thing that happens to Nemo at the beginning? Just type into the chat if you remember what happens to Nemo at the beginning. Anybody got any guesses? His mom died. He's taken to a dentist. That's partway through the movie. His mom died, right? That's the inciting incident. It's going to drive everything else that happens, because what happens after that? His dad's freaked out. So his dad won't let him do anything in life. So then he rebels against that. And then because of that, he gets taken by a dentist to the dentist's office, right? But each of these things, you can hear how one builds on the other, builds on the other, builds on the other. So this is just a way to diagram it and to think about it. Rising action with changes all the way up to the climax until they finally meet again at the end. And that's the resolution. But you might remember the ultimate resolution at the end is that they even, you see what happens next. The dad's confident, the son gets to live his life. So you can see how the arc of that story, but it keeps building. It's not just a semicircle. It's building.
Hey, Doug, just so you're aware, you have about 10 minutes.
Great, thank you. So in terms of one more way to think about structure is simply what happens next. So Ira Glass, who's the host of the show called This American Life, which is basically a documentary radio show. He said when he interviews people, he just says, what happened next? What happened next? And this is the simplest way for you to think about structure, is what happens next. You've done something to the characters. Did they end on a high note or a low note? If they end on a high note, maybe the next scene is going to be a low note for them. So you just have to keep thinking about that building. All right. The 4th piece of great storytelling is dialogue. Alfred Hitchcock said he writes the dialogue last. He wants to be sure the story and the structure are right. And then he puts the dialogue in, because that way the dialogue doesn't drive the story. If you're writing a play, dialogue is going to drive the story. But what do we know about people? They say one thing and they do something else. And in storytelling, we want to see what's happening. We don't want to just hear people say things. So many people have told you things that you believed, and later you found out the story was completely different. That's what humans do. That's why we can't just rely on dialogue. But talking is it's critical to our communication. So working on the dialogue, having that unique voice is really critical. How do you do it? By listening to how real people talk. I was at the library one day, I was listening to a group of high school students talk about their day, and it was so specific and unique. I enjoyed it so much because I don't talk like that anymore, and they talk very differently than I would have when I was 16. So someone asked me in the last session, how do you learn to write good dialogue? It's by listening to real people talk. Now, just to end, I want to talk to you about the movie Casablanca. How many people have seen the movie Casablanca? Just type in the chat, yes, if you've seen it. So Casablanca has some of the most famous, well-remembered dialogue of any movie. The people who said no, I encourage you to see it. You might say, oh, it's like black and white and it's like a play. Well, it kind of is, because that's the way movies were made at that time. But the story is really compelling and the dialogue is unbelievable. And I have just a snippet of the dialogue here at the bottom that I've highlighted. What I want to do to finish up is I'm actually going to show you this scene.
Plane taking off in 10 minutes. East runway. Visibility 1.5 miles. Nighttime fog. Depth of fog approximately 500. Ceiling unlimited. Thank you.
Will you have your man go with Mr. Laszlo and take care of his luggage?
Certainly, Rick. Anything you say. If I'm Mr. Laszlo's luggage, put it on the plane.
Yes, sir.
This way.
If you don't mind, you fill in the names. That'll make it even more official.
You think of everything, don't you?
The names are Mr. and Mrs. Victor Laszlo.
But why my name, Richard?
Because you're getting on that plane.
I don't understand. What about you?
I'm staying here with him until the plane gets safely away.
No, Richard, no. What's happened to you last night?
Last night, we said a great many things. You said I was to do the thinking for both of us. Well, I've done a lot of it since then. It all adds up to one thing. You're getting on that plane with Victor where you belong.
But Richard, no.
Now, you've got to listen to me. Have any idea what you'd have to look forward to if you stayed here? 9 chances out of 10, we'd both wind up at a concentration camp. Isn't that true, Louis?
I'm afraid Major Strasser would insist.
You're saying this only to make me go.
I'm saying it because it's true. Inside of us, we both know you belong with Victor. It's part of his work, the thing that keeps him going. If that plane leaves the ground and you're not with him, you'll regret it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, for the rest of your life.
What about us?
You'll always have Paris. We didn't have. We lost it until you came to Casablanca. We got it back last night.
I said I would never leave you.
And you never will. I've got a job to do, too. Where I'm going, you can't follow. What I've got to do, you can't be any part of. Bills, I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of 3 little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world. Someday you'll understand that. He's looking at you, kid.
Okay. So I'm just going to pop back to my thing just to finish up. So first of all, somebody wrote that, right? Somebody wrote some of the greatest dialogue of all time. So that's one of the things I want to encourage you to do is just write. Just get out there and write. Secondly, could you feel the rising tension in that scene? Could you see the ebb and flow of their emotions throughout? That wasn't just a one emotion scene. There was so much happening in that scene. And you can, if you diagram that scene, with that sine wave, you see those changes over time. So we've come all the way back to the beginning. There's no place like home. And just remember that if you infuse your writing with emotion, then you're going to have a real effect on your audience. So just to finish up, I just wanted to share a couple of resources that have been valuable to me. There's so much material out there. I mentioned this book, Write Screenplays That Sell the Ackerman Way. I think it's a great introduction to screenwriting. It was actually written by someone who teaches college students. So it's designed for people at that level, but anybody who's really getting started in writing. The book Story by Robert McKee. I think it has a lot of great sort of tidbits and information in it. One thing I really loved in there was he said, if you write the scene that you think is the greatest of all time, kill it, because it probably isn't. And then Save the Cat, which is really this, it talks specifically about structure. It's the way a lot of Hollywood movies are structured these days. Very specific events happening very specific places in a script. And once you learn the rules, you can break the rules. Also Creative Screenwriting Magazine, which just tons of interviews with writers and about the writing experience. Get some screenplay software. It doesn't have to be Final Draft, it could be any type of software, but it is so helpful to have that software. Don't just write in Word. This does so much of the formatting that's really important. And then this podcast, Script Notes, with John August, who wrote the live action remake of Aladdin. He wrote most of Tim Burton's films. Craig Mazin has a show coming out based on the video game The Last of Us. He did Chernobyl and a lot of comedy movies. Great discussions every week. They talk a lot about the business as well as structure of writing great screenplays. Finally, here is my LinkedIn information. Feel free to reach out to me. I would be glad to talk with you about anything that you're working on, something that you're interested in, or it's just great to be connected to people. This is how this business works. You get connected people, you help them, they help you.
All right, before we go, does anyone have any specific questions for Doug? Oh, Doug, you got some questions, it looked like you brought up.
Those are actually questions I've received before. So, but if
Okay.
anybody has, they're from a previous session, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. Gotta have at least one question.
I don't know,
Tell me something.
Doug, you were very thorough, to be fair. So I can understand where they might not ask, but other sessions I can understand. This one, that's okay. Yeah.
All right. Well,
Plus, involving everyone in the chat was a good move.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, just before I go, does anybody have anything they're working on they're just wondering about? You know, like I'm doing a documentary and I don't know what to do. Feel free to type something in. If not, you can contact me separately through that LinkedIn information. All right.
All right. Well,
Sure.
thanks for joining us, Doug, and yeah, thanks you guys for sticking around, listening to Doug speak as well. Got a couple more sessions throughout the day. It's gracious of Doug to offer his help and his contact information for you guys. So
it's my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, all of you. I mean, just remember, first of all, I still haven't made Avatar yet. I'm still working and trying to make things that I love, and it's not easy, but just get started. I mean, every filmmaker you've ever seen started to do it with nothing. I'm just going to leave you a quick story for you. So if you know who J.J. Abrams is, directed the last couple Star Wars movies, created Alias. Yeah, he's quite a producer, right? He started out by making Super 8 movies with his friends. And those movies ended up, someone wrote a story about kids making Super 8 movies. And those movies ended up with Steven Spielberg. And Steven Spielberg saw these movies, and he had a whole pile of movies from when he was a kid that he wanted edited together. So he hired J.J. Abrams and his friends to cut these movies together. J.J. Abrams was not an amazing student. He was the first one to say it. He focused his time on his films, but it was that interest that drove it. He's only J.J. Abrams now because of who he was when he was 16 years old, and he's right where you guys are right now. So just get out there and make stuff. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you all.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.